All right, everybody, we're back. Brand new Cabral Concept. Today, I want to tackle the topic of how to reduce your hunger, feel more satiated using something called the second meal effect. Now, I shared with you last week natural ways that your body can use certain foods to mimic the very popular right now GLP-1 drugs such as Ozempic, Mounjaro, etc. What I want to share with you today, though, is how we can take that to the next level through satiating our stomach, or technically, really, it's our mind, our brain, from not overeating throughout the day. Now, it technically starts at breakfast, so this may change the way that you look at breakfast. I want to share with you a great excerpt, an article by someone named Meccaline Duclef, and I apologize if that's not pronounced correctly, but what I want to do is just add a few quotes here, and then of course my own study, my own research on how I've seen this work in my own practice, working with clients since the late 90s. So the interesting thing is this, that a lot of these GLP drugs, what they're really doing is they are enabling you to keep this GLP sensitivity in your blood for days instead of just hours after a meal. And I'll tell you how to induce it after a meal. But what that means is when it's floating around in the bloodstream and makes its way to the brain after a meal, your body's like, oh, yeah, I'm full, right? I feel full. I'm satiated. The problem is, by the time it's made its way from the bacteria in your gut through the bloodstream, there's not a whole lot of it as it begins to hit the brain, and especially not after a couple hours. So what the GLP drugs do is they keep it around longer, and that's how they obviously limit appetite for some time. Now, of course, before you think that I'm recommending that you hop on these specific drugs, I'm not. I always recommend doing it the natural way to find the true underlying root cause in the first place, instead of just using pharmaceuticals, which can have their downsides. And one of them is true gastritis, digestive issues, nausea, that sometimes doesn't necessarily go back to normal even when you stop it. And it's not just for, they're claiming like 20%, 25%, seems to be far more, but I'll leave that for others to debate about. So I want to share with you is this, the way that we're able to induce this appetite suppressing hormone is by eating about 8 grams to 10 grams of fiber per meal. Now, if you feel like you heard this before, it is that we've been preaching this, that the goal is to get about 10 grams of fiber or more per meal. So if you're eating 3 meals per day, the goal is to get 30 plus grams of fiber per day. And that is the recommended amount. The recommended amount is 30 to 35 grams per day. Now, there will be many people who say, I don't eat that much fiber because it causes me bloating and gas and distension, alternating constipation and loose stool, joint pain, etc. I get it. I understand that. I'm not discounting that. What I'm saying is, though, if that's happening to you, that's because you have an overgrowth or dysbiosis of bacteria and or yeast in the gut. And due to that fact, you are fermenting those foods to too large of a degree because there is some type of imbalance and overgrowth. That doesn't mean that the foods are bad. It means the gut's imbalanced. And instead of staying away from them, you really want to get to the underlying root cause, which is the gut dysbiosis that in the long run will affect your mood because of neurotransmitters, your immune system, and much more. So I think it's just a great symptom of your body sharing with you something's wrong. I can't eat these natural foods. My recommendation is that you run the big 3 labs. The big 3 are the bacteria and parasite stool test, the Candida metabolic and vitamins test, which is a simple urine test, and the IgG food sensitivity test to test for latent-based response of certain foods. You can find all of these at stephencabral.com/shop. That just takes you over to the EcoLife Functional Medicine virtual practice, and you can purchase the labs there. They all come with a coaching call, or you can go to integrativehealthpractitioner.org, and of course, you can work with a practitioner right there, anywhere in the world. All right, so it's always your choice. I just want to make sure that you know that you have options. Okay, so let's get back to the fiber. I want to give you the specific type of fiber as well. So, here's really the issue, is that not all fiber is created equal. When you get a lot of processed foods, they're adding fiber back. It doesn't interact naturally with the food and your digestive system the same way. So what you want to look for is ideally foods that are higher in beta glucan. And why does that matter? Well, what happens is that these fibers, we'll just call them fiber because it's what it is, right? These specific types of carbs, they're slower digesting. So they slow the glucose response. That's one. Two, they don't necessarily get to the colon for 4 hours, 10 hours. And so what happens is you get this really delayed response in hunger. This is the second meal effect. So the meal before that precedes the next meal, you will not necessarily overeat. This is what they found in research and studies, if the meal before contains more fiber. Now, I've shared this in the past many times. I said, if you're hungry within an hour and a half of a meal, you're missing two main elements. One is the protein and one is the fiber. And I've seen this over and over in my practice. Now, last week, I gave you a couple more. One are specific fatty acids, mainly from olive oil. So you could add that to the list. But I still go back to that an individual hasn't eaten enough protein or enough fiber if they're hungry within basically 90 minutes of eating a meal. We have not activated the GLP-1, essentially sensors, but also another key hormone that decreases your appetite is called PYY, or peptide double Y, YY. And so all of these, there's actually more than 20 hormones. It gets quite complicated, but when we eat, we've got all of these different hormones that are produced saying, oh, thank you. Thank you for feeding us. Now we're going to calm down cortisol levels. We're going to calm down excitatory neurotransmitters. We're going to relax. We're going to switch from the sympathetic nervous system, hopefully, to the parasympathetic nervous system. We're going to rest and digest, right? But also, as we're breaking down this food, we need to send a sensor or a signal from the gut, the hepatic nervous system, which is the gut's nervous system, up to our brain as well. And it can do that through the vagus nerve, through the nervous system, but it also can do that through sending these hormones in the blood and them being picked up by receptors in the brain. So it all happens. Because if not, then our hunger, our satiation would never turn off. So by getting that 8 to 10 grams or more of fiber per meal, and again, start with 5 if you're not used to eating a lot of fiber, and work your way up. Many people in our practice, and I'm not saying this is right for everyone, they'll eat 40, 50 plus grams of fiber per day. And the way that they're doing that is through fruits, lots of veggies, and some natural whole grains that are mainly gluten-free and don't give them any digestive issues. It could be, well, let me give you those foods in just a moment, because there's specific foods that are a little bit higher in beta glucans that I think are very, very helpful. Okay, so let me give you the direct quote now from this article. Basically, I gave you all of my thoughts, all of my feelings, how the physiology works in the body. I want to share with you a very interesting quote, though. So I like to pull out quotes. I always like to give credit where credit's due. So these hormones may influence how much you eat at the next meal. This is what's called a second meal effect. And let's see here. If you eat a lot of fiber at one meal, by the time it's in your colon, it's around the time of your next meal. So you may have improved insulin responses and improved satiety or a feeling of fullness. Now, that was the quote. I also called this out for one reason, because it's not totally true. And that is because food does not fully move from your stomach to your colon within 3 to 5 hours. That does not happen. What happens is when we eat food, moves down our esophagus, 12 inches, 16 inches, 18 inches, depending on the height of the individual, goes into our stomach. If it's a complicated meal, protein, carbs, and fat, especially if there's some meat in there, some raw veggies maybe, it could be 3 hours, 4 hours before the stomach empties. Okay. Now it's in our small intestine, and it empties, of course, like a teaspoon at a time, very slowly. Then it's in the duodenum. It's in just the first part of the small intestine, and it's in 20 feet of small intestine. It's not a race through your small intestine. Your small intestine moves duodenum, the jejunum, the ileum. It's breaking down certain foods. It's making certain vitamins like your B vitamins or B12. All of these things are happening. Then it enters from the ileum into the cecum. That's the first part of the large intestine. I can actually show you quickly. if you're watching this on video. So basically it moves through the stomach and it moves into the small intestine, which is called small because it's smaller in diameter, right? Circumference, not necessarily then in length. So it moves through 20 feet or so of small intestine and then 5 feet of the colon right here. And then ultimately it will make its way out of the body over 12 hours to 24 hours or so. So that isn't necessarily true. But what happens is this: if each meal contains 8 to 10 grams of fiber, as the fiber moves through the small intestine and ultimately makes its way to the colon, right? If you're eating, let's say 3 meals over 12 hours or so, then what you're looking at is every few hours, you're getting more fiber to the colon. The colon is producing natural and healthy short-chain fatty acids, and these specific hormones saying that the body is satiated. So there's the initial satiation of eating. The body senses what's coming in. It sends signals. We get feelings of satiety. And then over time, over these meals, we get what's called the second meal effect, where we're not famished and overeat at the next meal if we get the protein and specifically carbs and fiber that we need in order to feel full. So now, what are some of these magic carbohydrates? I wanted to list for you a few, all right? I can list more, but really what we're looking for, and it's just one, it's not all, but one of these that are quite powerful are beta glucans. Beta glucans are also great for the immune system. That's why I wanted to name that as well. And as long as the body's balanced, can be very powerful at balancing healthy levels of inflammation. Okay, let me give you first a few whole grains. Now, if you don't like whole grains and you don't want to use whole grains, that's okay. That's your choice, right? But barley is one of the superstars of beta glucans, oats and rye. Now, I name those three very specifically as well, because in a lot of the centenarian, the oldest people and the healthiest people, even that Dr. Weston Price found, they eat barley, oats, and rye. Those are three very hearty grains. And if we look more towards, not including rye, because rye has gluten, although it has less gluten, if we look more towards a barley, but definitely oats, it's going to be essentially oats gluten-free. Now, you have to buy gluten-free oats, but cross-contamination can sometimes contaminate oats. So what we're looking at here, though, is low to no gluten-based oats, or I should say whole grains. Those can be really powerful as part of your diet. And I'm not talking about processed, right? I'm talking about good whole grains. All right, let's say you don't want to eat whole grains. Well, there are others. Apples, pears are also quite beneficial in this specific type of fiber that is more fermentable and improves the satiety of the body. A couple more: beans, lentils, peas. All of those, now I know they can cause a lot of distress and digestive distress in some people, so you might want to pressure cook them, you might want to sprout them, whatever you'd like, you're still going to get a lot of those benefits of the fiber. That is one of the ways that I'm able to get a lot of fiber in my diet, is 1 cup of beans per day, or 3/4 to 1 cup of beans per day. Cannellini beans, black beans, chickpeas, navy beans. All of these can be excellent, right? There's lots of great beans, dal, mung beans, lentils, etc. Really great for you, not only for the colon, but the overall health of your body. So there's that. And then one of the ones I would just say in general that I think is great is still to be able to get in your greens. Different types of greens. Green beans is one of those, but really just trying to get in greens and even, and this doesn't work for everybody, but some of the more resistant starches, maybe a certain, like purple potatoes I'm a big fan of, but not quite ripe bananas. Those can be beneficial for a lot of people as well to get that satiety. So not overly ripe, but a little less ripe bananas, if that can be very helpful for a lot of people as well to feel more satiated. So hopefully this was helpful, but what I wanted to do was bring you today one more way that you can mimic drugs and pharmaceuticals with nature, bring the body back into balance, and ultimately create an organism that lives in a state and thrives in a state of wellness. So it doesn't need drugs in order to feel satiated between meals. It doesn't need drugs in order to burn more body fat. You're doing that through good, clean living, healthy water, healthy food, healthy air, healthy movement, all of the things for the de-stress protocol that I talk about in the Rain Barrel Effect. So if you want to check out all the takeaways, head on over to stephencabral.com/3043, and we'll also link up last week's show on how to mimic these GLP drugs with 5 specific types of foods. All right, take care, everybody. Have an amazing rest of the day. I'll talk with you tomorrow on the Cabral Concept. Thanks so much for tuning into today's show. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I want to make sure that you're getting our daily content, not missing out on anything. Functional medicine, wellness, weight gain, weight loss, anti-aging, living longer, stronger, and all of the most cutting-edge research. And if there's any topics you want to hear, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Take care.